In this chapter, we're going to look at the different ways you can mount or support your endless climbing wall at home. Every space is different, so before you start building, you need to understand which option fits your room, your structure, and the way you want your wall to behave. I'll walk you through common setups. Some require drilling, others don't. Some work well in tight rooms, others need more open space. By the end of this chapter, you'll know which direction makes sense for you. Option 1. Anchoring into the floor an upper support beam. The first option, and the setup I personally used, is anchoring the frame into the floor and into an upper structural beam, in my case, the roof beam of my garage. This creates a very strong and reliable structure because the weight of the rotating wall is directly carried by the building itself. The lower anchors take the forces going into the ground, while the upper anchors handle the pulling forces, especially once the wall is tilted forward. If you decide to use this method, the first part to secure is the bottom of the frame. On each side of the frame, right at the foot, you need 2 heavy-duty angle irons. That means 4 angle irons in total. These angle irons are bolted through the wooden base frame, not just screwed onto it. The threaded bolt goes through the wooden frame. This is important because it allows the angle iron to rotate slightly around the bolt when the wall is tilted. The angle iron itself is still tightened firmly, but the single bolt axis allows this controlled rotation when the wall changes angle. Do not use regular wood screws here. Standard wood screws are not suitable for this application because they do not provide the long-term strength and stiffness required for a rotating climbing wall. You must use threaded bolts, and they should be at least 8 mm in diameter. I personally use 8 mm threaded bolts. These bolts carry the full load of the wall and must work reliably over time. A thinner, conventional wood screw cannot guarantee that. Each angle iron also needs to be fixed into the floor with 2 strong anchor bolts. In my setup, these anchors went about 8 centimeters deep into the ground and were paired with large wall plugs matched to the bolt size. Let me be very clear here. Do not save money on angle irons or bolts. On my very first wall, I used only 1 angle iron per side. As soon as I changed the incline of the wall, the frame ripped out of the floor. After switching to 2 angle irons per side, everything became completely solid. Once the bottom is secure, the frame must also be anchored at the top. This upper fixation is fundamentally important. Because the wall is fixed at the bottom with the rotating angle irons, the wall can freely rotate around that lower point. Without a strong upper anchor, the wall would automatically tilt forward under its own weight. This makes the upper fixation even more critical, especially once the wall is inclined. As soon as you add angle, the forces increase significantly at the upper fixing point, and this is where most of the load concentrates. Here as well, I use 8 mm threaded bolts, never wood screws. The wall itself weighs roughly between 100 and 150 kilograms, so the upper anchor point must be taken very seriously. In my case, I fixed the upper anchors into a thick wooden beam that supports the roof of my garage. I drilled straight through that beam and used thick threaded bolts. For the actual anchor points, I did not use standard hardware store brackets. Instead, I used climbing hangers, the same type used on real climbing routes. These are designed for extremely high loads and eliminate weak points that cheaper brackets can introduce. To add redundancy, I installed 2 upper anchor points on each side. If one bolt or hanger were ever to fail, the second one would immediately take the load. This is very unlikely to happen, but redundancy adds an important extra layer of safety. This entire configuration, the floor angle irons, the threaded bolts, the climbing hangers, and the double upper anchors is my personal setup and the way I build my own endless climbing wall. Option 2. Wooden base platform with upper wall beam. At the bottom, you build a solid wooden platform from beams. And these beams act as a base and support surface for the wall. The angle irons of the wall frame are placed on this base. You can think of this setup as the same solution as anchoring directly to the floor. The only difference is that instead of the floor, you are using wooden beams as the support layer. The wall is then fixed onto these beams. Important: in the climbing wall frame itself, you must still use threaded bolts. However, to fix the angle irons onto the wooden base construction, wood screws are acceptable. It is also important that the floor beams are connected to each other horizontally and do not just lie on the floor as individual pieces. You should tie them together with additional cross beams so the base acts as one rigid platform. 2 to 3 cross connections between the floor beams are usually sufficient to greatly increase stiffness and prevent any movement or twisting. If needed, these floor beams can later be covered with a mat or a bouldering crash pad, so they are not in the way and still remain protected. At the top, you create the upper structure by fixing vertical wooden beams directly to a solid wall. These vertical beams act as the load-bearing interface between the wall and the climbing wall structure. It is strongly recommended to fix these vertical beams to the wall as often as possible along their height, not just at 1 or 2 points. The more fixing points you use, the better the loads are distributed into the wall, especially important when the climbing wall is tilted. Once the vertical beams are in place, you then install the actual anchor points at the required height. These anchor points are mounted into the vertical beams using threaded bolts and climbing hangers. For each side, you should install 2 hangers per beam, one main anchor and a second one purely for redundancy. The climbing wall is then anchored to these points. Option 3. Fully freestanding construction without drilling. The third option is a fully freestanding setup. Here you build a strong wooden floor frame that sits freely on the ground. The angle irons of the wall frame are fixed onto this base frame. From there, the vertical beams of the wall rise upward. The key element that makes this work is diagonal bracing. The vertical beams and horizontal floor beams are connected using diagonal beams. These diagonal beams create triangles, and it is the triangular geometry that makes the structure self-supporting and stable. The floor beams should be roughly as long as the height of the climbing wall. These beams lie flat on the floor. The vertical beams stand behind the climbing wall and are fixed to the floor beams. Near the top of the vertical beams, diagonal beams run down to the far end of the floor beams. This diagonal structure is essential. It is not optional. It is what prevents the wall from tipping, flexing, or collapsing under load. Option 4. Combined or hybrid solutions. There is also a fourth option, combining elements from different setups. Many real-world spaces don't fit perfectly into one category. You might anchor the top but build a base platform, or use partial freestanding supports together with wall anchors. These hybrid solutions are often the best fit for home environments, as long as the load paths are clear and the structure remains stiff and predictable. If you're unsure which combination makes sense for your space, I'm always happy to help and give feedback based on your situation. Final thoughts. Each of these options can work very well if built correctly. The right choice depends on your space, whether you can drill into the floor or walls, and how permanent you want the installation to be. What matters most is that forces are carried safely and that the structure remains stable under load. In the next chapters, we'll go deeper into planning your exact setup so you can choose and build the option that fits your space best.